Okay, guys, today we've got something big to react to. Walter Isaacson, the guy who literally wrote the biographies on Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, was on CNBC talking about the U.S. government taking a stake in Intel. This isn't just business news. This could change the future of technology. Let's dive in.
White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett telling us that the government's stake in Intel is like a down payment on a sovereign wealth fund. And on our air yesterday, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick referred to a national economic security fund. Joining us right now is CNBC contributor Walter Isaacson, the legendary Walter Isaacson. He's a professor at Tulane University, also Perella Weinberg advisory partner and great friend of the show. Walter, thank you for joining us this morning. We've all been trying to make sense of what we've learned even in the past week as it relates to this Intel investment, but maybe even more so the idea that the president is saying quite openly he's hoping to do this again and again. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think state capitalism is always a bad idea, whether it's the way you do it in China or you do it in other places. You don't want the federal government to be controlling major corporations, and for that matter, to be competing against other corporations. If they have a stake in Intel, what does that mean for competition? We've always resisted that.
Right away, the way CNBC frames this shows how serious it is. They're not treating this like a small stock story. It's framed as a national issue. And hearing Walter Isaacson talk about it gives it extra weight. He's not just any guest. This guy has covered the most influential tech leaders in history.
There's a tradition that goes back, I don't know, 400 or 500 years where, King Louis XIV has Jean-Baptiste Colbert doing this mercantile system and making companies be partly owned by the state with their gilded palaces. That's the type of thing we've always tried to avoid in America.
So the question is, if you are right, why do you think we have not heard, and we talked about it earlier with Arthur Brooks, we haven't heard from the Chamber of Commerce or the Business Roundtable or business leaders or traditional, conservatives that are either senators or congressmen or governors or whatnot on this issue who I think probably agree with you but haven't said so aloud?
Well, first of all, you've heard from things like the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, which is very much, aligned with free markets, free trade, free ideas, being totally against this. You're asking a larger question, which is why do not senators and mainstream Republicans feel like standing up to Trump? And that's up and down the board on these things. Certainly creating a type of crony-ish capitalism where some are favored and some aren't goes against the grain of most Republican thinking for 50 years.
And so when you sort of think through the permutations of this, if you and I were having this conversation 5 years, 10 years from now, what do you think it looks like?
Well, imagine, do the thought experiment, because every now and then people on your show sometimes say, what aboutism? What about when Obama, Solyndra, or Joe Biden did whatever? Imagine the thought experiment of a Democratic president deciding to do similar things and to take stakes in companies and tell those companies, how to do their logos, how to put sugar in their, their Coca-Cola formulas, how to fire a CEO. I think we'd be outraged. So if 20 years from now this is happening with both parties, we've gone down a really bad path here. I mean, we need competition. We need antitrust enforcement. We don't need the government favoring certain companies.
Wait, the U.S. government is literally owning part of Intel? That's wild. Normally, the government just regulates companies. They don't buy in. That shows how important semiconductors are right now. This is where it gets interesting. It's not just about profit. Chips power everything: phones, AI, defense systems. Whoever controls the chip supply controls the future. So yeah, you can see why the government would step in here. On one hand, Intel gets money and stability. On the other hand, when the government has a stake in you, you can't just do whatever you want. There will be strings attached.
Walter, I wanted to ask you about Musk v. Altman, the lawsuit. Now, my first thought, I have to say, with two very deep-pocketed individuals, is that the clear winner will be the attorneys on either side and the fees that are going to be racked up on this. Is there some legitimacy on what both sides are saying?
Absolutely.
Apple might...
Yeah, absolutely. What you have is partly a personal thing. In my book, I have a couple of chapters on Elon Musk and Sam Altman creating OpenAI to be open, to be in the public interest. And then they have a huge fight where Musk wants to take over the company. So, it's like Musk versus Zuckerberg, Musk versus many other people. It's partly personal. But there's a deeper thing. And once again, it's historical, and it goes back to the Sherman Antitrust Act, to US v. Standard Oil, and then all the way to US v. Microsoft and Apple, which is if you have dominance in an industry. And there's a question that hasn't been totally resolved, is whether Apple is either a monopoly in the iOS-type smartphone industry or has dominance. But whatever it is, you cannot, by law, use dominance like that to either protect your dominance, in other words, to say, in my app store, I'm going to favor people who pay me money. That's what happened when Google tried to pay Apple, in order to be the search engine, the default search engine. The government shut that down. So there's real legitimacy here, which is, does Apple, with its app store, extract too much rent from people in the store? Epic Games was suing on that. And likewise, is it being unfair to competitors? Because Apple has a relationship with OpenAI. So does Microsoft. You want to have multiple players in the AI field. But if Microsoft and Apple decide they're going to favor OpenAI, it cuts down on competition, and it hurts, of course, Elon Musk's Grok XAI.
What Isaacson is really saying is this. We're moving into a new age where technology is as critical as oil once was. The chip war is the new energy war. And this is just the beginning. Expect more government moves like this.
Is it fair to say that X favors Grok, but perhaps X isn't as influential or dominant?
Absolutely. Yes, X, formerly Twitter, favors Grok, but X is not a dominant or monopoly position by any means. And so you're allowed to do that, except if you're protecting a monopoly in the field. X does not, or X Twitter does not have a monopoly in the field of social media. Part of the case here is, does Apple have dominance or monopoly? Something that various courts haven't quite settled yet. But there's a big difference between a company that has a small percentage of a market favoring itself. The bigger question on this, in my mind, which really strikes me, is Google, which has real dominance in the search engine market. Now, when I search on Google, it gives me Gemini results. Is that tying or bundling like John D. Rockefeller was forbidden to do way back in the 1920s with US v. Standard Oil? I think it is. I don't think that Google should be allowed to bundle Gemini search the way it does and hurt other, not only search engines, but CNBC, where it doesn't send you to the CNBC website, it gives you its AI result.
Hey, Walter, I wanted to ask you a different question. As somebody who has studied American history, we are in this very unusual moment as it relates to the Federal Reserve and Lisa Cook and this situation. And it's clearly going to go to the courts. And I'm curious about what you think of the independence of the Fed, how independent you think the Fed should be, can be, will be. And are you surprised that the market, people have been saying for months that, Fed independence is so important. And if it's not independent, the markets will react and they will be the governors on this. And yet they haven't.
Right. Greg Yip writes about it today in the Wall Street Journal, which is why haven't the markets reacted more? I personally am in favor of an independent Fed. I don't want Democratic presidents or Republican presidents for political reasons to say, okay, let's flood the money supply or let's lower interest rates. But more important than my opinion is it's been the opinion of Congress, the opinion of the courts for more than 50 years. Having an independent Fed that helps set money supply, inflation targets, and interest rates is by law the way things are. And you saw the Supreme Court, which gave the Trump administration a lot of power to fire people on independent agencies. But in their decision, they carve out the Federal Reserve for very good reason.
So that's my reaction to Walter Isaacson's take on the U.S. buying into Intel. Honestly, this could reshape the tech industry. But I want to hear from you. Do you think this is a smart move, or should the government stay out of private companies? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.